So, the people have spoken, the votes are in, and you guys voted the most for a wax carving video. So here we are with a wax carving video. There was a very close call between the Instagram do's and don'ts, so I will be doing one of those next week. So everybody will be happy. So I thought I'd explain to you guys the pros and cons of working in wax compared to working directly into silver. If you're new to this, then you might be wondering, why do people do wax or why do people use sheet? So I'll kind of just explain a little bit about that so you can make a decision about what works best for you. First, I used to always work in sheet and in wire just because I didn't want to have a sudden big expense and not know how much it was going to cost, because obviously it's per gram you pay and then you need to make a mold if you're taking it somewhere to have it cast. So, you know, depending on the weight of it, then suddenly it's going to be this much. So I was counting my pennies when I first started. So I rather just bought the sheet and the wire so I knew exactly how much I was spending and I felt more comfortable working like that. Also, I like to work with paper, like folded paper, as ways of coming up with designs. So obviously those designs lend themselves more towards working from sheet. So I have recently come back to wax because I want to create more organic shapes. So it's easier to do that when you're carving from wax and you have more 3D pieces. If you don't work with CAD, which is obviously the computer software, that you can also design 3D pieces, get those printed, and then get those cast. But this is a more hands-on way of doing it, and I'm all about the hands-on. So I really, really like the wax because also it allows you to make one master, so one piece. So I can carve that one ring, and then I can send that off to the casters, and it's called the lost wax casting technique. So basically I'll give them this, they then create a mold around that, and then they melt out this piece. So this wax piece will be gone, but then they pour the metal into that space that's been made from the mold, and then you get your silver, brass, gold, whatever you want to cast in, gold, imagine. Very nice, but very expensive depending on what you're doing. Then you get your silver piece, which will come with a little stick sticking out called a sprue. So that's where they would have a channel where they pour the hot metal into, and then you would cut that off, and then you finish it up and clean it up yourself. So that is really, really helpful in terms of you then having a mold. So you can then make that one piece, and then you can ask them to cast 10, 20, 15, however many you want of that same piece, and the work you have done is already, all the main effort has already gone into making the wax, which then you don't need to worry about that in the long run again. So it saves you time when you want to make more of a piece. But say you're just beginning and you're not worried about mass producing any of your pieces and you just want to do one-off pieces, or you're just making everything yourself and you're not too worried about that, then maybe working in sheet and wire is a good way to go. But as I'm now expanding my jewelry business and I am getting some help with my making, I am doing wax because then I do that work, we create the mold, and it just speeds up the process with that. So with them casting them in the mold and doing all that, it makes it a whole lot faster for me. So also I'm really enjoying the more kind of like organic shapes of things. So like having these like smooth curves and different shapes. I'm really, really enjoying that at the moment. So it also makes a nice change, and I love the carving aspect of it. So if you really are quite a visual person and you like to bring the shapes out of things, then carving is really nice. But some people actually don't like it because it's hard for them to take this and turn it into this without seeing it. So personally, I really like that process. I find it quite therapeutic carving the wax, and it's quite nice and soft to work with. So it's quite nice to have that. So those are some pros and cons for you to think about. And have fun playing with both of them if you're not sure which one you like yet. Anyway, let's get crackling and carving this ring then, shall we? So. Should I put this phone back on then? Because no, but I'm still just carving this, and they already think I've done this, so never mind. I'm going to switch this off then. Right, wax carving is so much fun. So you can do all kinds of different things. For those of you guys who haven't done any wax carving yet, it's really nice. So you can do really organic-y things like this. So this was actually my very first wax carving project that I did when I started learning. So inspired by a little twig that I found from a silver birch tree. So I left it with a rough texture because I wanted to kind of replicate the bark. I also made this one, which is kind of just like a kind of organic-y sort of kind of curved ring, just to try something out. So that's really quite simple and easy to make, really. Then we have got this violin ring, which is one of my latest pieces. And I just absolutely am in love with its smooth, gentle curves, and it just feels so nice on. So it's gold plated, cast in recycled sterling silver. That is the violin ring. My boyfriend has asked me to make this ring for him. So this is the last ring that I made for him, which has kind of got a lovely like textured finish. So it kind of looks like bark of a tree, so kind of like woody vibes, so quite nice and rough and textured on the outside, and then super silky smooth on the inside. So he loves it, but it's really quite big, so it's quite wide, so it is not super comfy. So what I'm going to do today is make a narrower ring for him that is inspired by the violin ring, so with a groove that runs all the way along. So it runs all the way down the full body of it, but obviously it's going to stay the same thickness. So he wants it the same thickness as this, which I've measured as 12 millimeters. So I'm going to create a band that's 12 mil wide with a groove all the way along. So it's kind of also quite nice and satisfying to play with when you're wearing it. So what we're going to do first, I'm just going to show you the kind of wax carving tools that we've got. So tools and materials that you can use. So we have got a little pack like this of the pieces of wax in strips. So they're like different thicknesses, from little like narrow one down to much thicker ones like that. So you can play with those. These are quite nice for pendants or other things like that. But you can also obviously cut a ring out of it and then do your carving from there. But to save you time, if you already know you're going to make a ring, then we've got these. So I've got these different shapes. So they've got a hole that runs down the middle. Hello. And then there's also one that's a bit round like that. So depending on what kind of ring you're going for, you might want to choose one or the other. So those are those, like that. And I think I am going to go with, let me just check the size. So depending on the size of the ring, what I decided. I think just to save time, I think I'm going to go with this one and just carve it out gently. So I'm going to go with the round one and carve that one out. So we've got that, and then what we need to do is measure how wide we want it. So obviously I'm going to cut it, and it's when I cut it, no matter how careful I try to be, it's still going to be quite rough. So we've got different blades for the wax. So I'm going to try and show you these ones here. So they're kind of twisted, so the teeth don't clog up so much. So they're quite fine and delicate. So I'm just going to exchange that in my frame here, like that. So open that out, take that guy out, and same as with a normal blade, you want the teeth to be facing down. So if you run your finger along it, then you want to feel that it's not hooking when you're going down like that. So put that in here and then just tighten that up on the top section first, and then push and tighten on the bottom, same as you would a normal blade. Nice and tight. So I'm just going to make it quite a bit bigger than I need, and then I can work my way down from that. So I'm going to cut it here, just going to do a little mark here, and then I'm just going to go by eye for now, and I'm making this bigger than I want because it's not going to actually cut very straight. And then we're going to cut that out. And it's so much softer to cut than metal. So if you've been working in metal a lot, it's like cutting through butter when you're doing it with the wax. It's quite nice. So just try and keep my blade nice and straight. Work my way all the way through. Voila. All of that. It's snowing. Blue snow. Right, so that is lovely. Now what we want to do first up is to get the size right. So I'm going to use this tool, which has got non-familiar sizes to me because I'm familiar with the UK sizing of the alphabet, but nevertheless it doesn't matter. I'm just going to use it to carve out, and I'll use my own measuring tools afterwards so that I know what size I'm going for. So the trick is to put it in and then not push it in too tight so that it hooks, but to kind of keep it a bit loose so that you can push the ring against the tool. So obviously I want to take away more from here because this is where the bulk of the excess is, and I want it to be kind of the same all the way around. So I'm just going to slowly work my way through, and then remember to turn it around from time to time because obviously this is a cylindrical shape, and obviously the one side is going to be taking off more than the other, so we want to kind of even that out. In the beginning it doesn't matter too much how even you're doing it, but you do want to try and aim for it to be relatively smooth cuts, because when you start to get little dents in it, then it hooks and then it's not very easy to do. So try and be kind of as smooth as you can. We can obviously smooth off the inside afterwards with a surgical blade, which we'll come to later for cleaning things up. Right, so at this stage I need Emil to try it on, so we're going to borrow his fingers because we have them here. Otherwise what you can do is put it against your ring sizer or put it onto a proper ring sizer like this. I have another one, but it's in the cupboard behind you guys. So you put that on there and check it for size. So at this stage you also want to make sure that it's nice and round. So let's just try it. I'm not sure if it fits, but it's better to be on the safe side. Okay, so it's nearly there, but not quite. So we'll keep carving that a little bit. So make sure that everything's nice and smooth and there's no like big dents in it or anything like that. What I also do is kind of carve a bit off on the outsides, so it's kind of comfortable to wear. And with this, we've still got a good amount to play with in terms of the outside and the shape that we want to get. Let's probably try that on again. Can you bring us your finger, please? What do you think? It's going to shrink a tiny little bit because wax shrinks a little bit. So I think I'm just going to neaten up the inside. So just make sure it's really nice and round, and that will probably take off that little bit extra that we don't want there. So for that, I can use the surgical blade. So I'm just going to use that, and you can kind of scrape it. So the trick is to hold it at an angle so that you're pulling towards yourself, but you're not having it directly straight because then it's going to create dents. It's going to hook into the wax. So you want to be pulling it along kind of, you want to be like peeling it, if that makes sense. Always kind of look at it as like peeling potatoes or peeling something. So sometimes it's easy to hold with your hand here, but because this is kind of small, I'm just going to press it against here because the outside isn't carved yet, so we don't need to be too delicate and gentle with that. and I'm just looking at it and seeing where it's not quite round, where it needs to come off a little bit, but I'm still shaving a fair bit. So at this stage it's good to know the size, know how much you need to take off. So always leave a little bit extra so that you can do the kind of smoothing out and stuff afterwards. You can also, if you have a lot to do, you could use the file. So I have these different shape profile files, so these are all specifically for wax. So the difference between the wax ones and the metal ones is just the coarseness of the file. So you see this side's really, really coarse, so that's for taking off a lot of wax, and then that one's a little bit finer, and then these ones are kind of a little bit finer than these in different profiles. So we're going to be using this one probably for our shape that we want on this one. Right, when we get to the end and we're doing all the finishing touches, then I'll be able to just see what needs to be done and everything, but that looks relatively good for now, and that fits and it's round, so great. Now we need to work on the outside. So the outside, I like to use these files, so depending on how much you want to take off, you might want to use a coarser one, or you might want to use a little bit finer one. I really like these ones. I'll put a link in the description for you guys. If I find something that I think looks good for you guys, I'll put that on there. So what you want to do now is just to carve the shape you want. So I'm going to first of all flatten this surface here so that there's no lumps and bumps there. So I'm going to actually do that with the bigger one. Just put that flat and then just work my way across. And because I actually need to take off a fair bit, I might switch to a bit more coarse one on this particular part. Okay, that's pretty much fine like that, because we're still going to clean up those edges anyway, but it's relatively in the right shape for now. So first of all, what you want to do is to reduce the thickness of the band a little bit. So obviously it's quite thick now, so before I start carving the groove, I'm going to reduce the thickness of the wall a little bit so that it is going to be the right size. So you see, as I'm doing this, I'm holding my fingers at the point that I'm filing so that I don't break that. So that's also another little trick over there. So back to my file. So now I'm going to be rounding this edge off first so that I'm starting to create that edge. But then what I want to do is take the round one and then try and create a little kind of channel. I don't really have a narrower one of this. I don't really want to use my metal one because it's going to get all clogged up. But if I have to, I might, and then I can just use the steel brush like this just to clean out the file. So I'm going to try with this one first and see how that goes. So I want to create a little groove here. Like that. Right, so we just revised and we decided only to go halfway around with the groove. So I've done halfway and just gonna narrow this other part down a little bit so it's not so thick, so it's more comfortable, and round off all the edges so that everything's nice and smooth and comfortable to wear, and obviously blend now this groove with the outside bits without taking too much down. So I'm gonna probably use this half round file to do that, and just kind of like gently ease all the edges in so it kind of flows a little bit better. So when I go on the inside, then I use the curved side so that I don't make any dents in it. So I'm just going to go around all the way around like that. Right, so now that I've kind of gone around all the edges, made sure that it's all smooth and feels really comfy on, what I'm gonna do is just clean it up using the blade, so this is the surgical blade. So I kind of like run it along like I'm peeling something and just drag that along the surface just to get rid of any of the little grooves and little file marks from all the filing. So that's one option you can do. Or what you can do is take a piece of sandpaper, like quite a fine grit, so maybe like a 600 or 800 depending on the amount of scratches you have, and then just run that in the hard to reach areas. So obviously there's a groove there, so I can't get the blade in there comfortably, so I'm just going to do that, because basically whatever it looks like now is what it's going to come out like in the cast. So any little scratches and marks you want to get rid of in the wax, because it's obviously going to be a lot easier to get it off when it's in the wax state rather than once you've cast it and it's in metal, because then you're going to have a lot more work to get rid of them. So whatever kind of finish you want as well, like if you wanted to have a rough finish, then leave it like that. But yeah, so just make sure that it's all nice and smooth and feels good to the touch, either using that, or what you can also do to get rid of all the little bits. So when you're filing, you're gonna get lots of little bits of the dust, like the little bits. So you can take a piece of old stocking, which I don't have one because I don't wear stockings, and then you can just rub that over, and that will really get rid of any of the little bits of stuff in there. So I can use my apron to do that, just to make sure that there aren't any little bits on it. But I kind of gave it a little wipe already, but just to remove all the little loose bits so that you really get to see the final finish. I finished it off and I have made it all super duper nice and smooth. So I decided to actually not make the groove all the way around, so we did a half. So you can kind of see it there. So it's halfway around, so it's kind of just something nice to play with, and there's a little bit more, yeah, like difference in the feel of it as you play with it when you're wearing it. Yeah, so what we need to do now is to take this to the caster, and what he's going to do is attach a little stick on here out of wax as well, and then cast that, and then we will get that back, and then we'll do a part 2 of this video of how to finish it off and see what it looks like when it comes out, and see what it looks like when it's all sparkly and shiny in silver. So that is where we're going to end the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Obviously this was more of a beginner wax carving tutorial kind of video, so obviously there's way more complicated things you can do, but just as like a starting point, that's kind of how you do it on limited tools. You can do quite a lot and have quite a lot of fun with it. So if you're up for it, have a go. I would love to see what you're doing. If you're on Instagram, tag me there. I would love to see what you guys have made. Anyway, until next week, I'm wishing you guys a super lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.